all please settle down? We are going to start the proceedings. Good morning, distinguished guests, dignitaries, and esteemed participants. I am Sunil Kumar, Deputy Secretary in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And on behalf of the Ministry, I am privileged and honored to welcome all of you to the 18th Urban Mobility India Conference-cum-Exhibition 2025. This technical session is on evolving low emission zones for Indian cities. And this session is being graciously chaired by Professor Ashish Verma, Transport System Engineering, Department of Civil Engineering, Indian Institute of Science, IISc Bangalore. Sri Verma has done his PhD from IIT Bombay and has authored more than 290 research publications, including more than 130 journal publications in the area of sustainable transportation. He is also the founding president of International Group of Sustainable Transport and Livability, and is presently serving as a steering and scientific committee member of World Conference on Transport Research Society. The session is co-chaired by Mr. Mohinder Singh, former Dean of LTA, Academy of Singapore. Mr. Singh has worked over 40 years in transport planning and traffic engineering. He works as a transport consultant upon retiring from LTA and is an adjunct professor at the National University of Singapore and teaches courses on city planning and development. Guiding the discussion as a moderator is Mrs. Aswati Dilip, Managing Director at IIDP India. She is a sought-after expert in raising support for sustainable mobility from key decision makers, government, and stakeholders. Moreover, she has led the implementation of 3 national programs by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and Smart City Mission, that are India Cycle for Change, A Street for People, and Transport for All. To begin the session, I am honored to request the moderator, Ms. Aswati Dilip, to graciously guide the proceeding of the session. Madam, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Happy morning, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of the Urban Mobility India Conclave. It is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces, at the same time, so many new faces as well. So for the new folks who are joining us today, I'd like to start by just giving a summary of the discussions that we had yesterday. We had some truly inspiring conversations. We explored how mobility in India's Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are. We talked about how citizen engagement can shape public transport systems and discussed how gender and accessibility are integral parts of mobility planning. We looked at various foundational pieces of mobility: better public transport, integration between metro and bus networks, safe walking and cycling infrastructure, and ensuring that gender is in the heart of all of these discussions. Now, these are the foundations that make our city truly livable. Over ITDP's 2 decades experience of working with multiple cities across the country, we've seen that cities have taken various levels of action on this front. But as we strengthen these systems, we're beginning to feel the impact of what that we've not taken and where we've not moved fast enough. And I'm here to talk about air pollution. Air pollution has gone and become beyond a problem from environmental concern into a full-blown public health crisis. Of course, we understand that there are various sources, industry, waste burning, etc. But let's look at the factors that we can control. Transport is a major part of the story. In several cities, vehicles contribute up to 20 to 30% of the fine particulate pollution, PM2.5, and most of the nitrogen oxides and carbon monoxide in the air we breathe. And this is where is the paradox. We're looking at promoting walking, cycling, public transport, the modes that are most essential for our cities. And then we have citizens who are using two-wheelers and auto rickshaws because these foundations are not in place. but it's these people who will be breathing the most dirtiest air. In order to tackle transport emissions, we've taken steps. We brought in BS6 standards, we're looking at cleaner fuels, and there is the growing electric vehicle adoption. Yet, old, highly polluting, poorly maintained vehicles, along with weaker enforcement, continue to undo much of that progress. Real-world emissions can be multiple times higher than the certification limits. Some research shows that these emissions are 5 to 14 times greater for certain pollutants and vehicular types as well. So today I'm going to start by asking you a more personal question. How many of you have seen someone from your family or yourself feeling that you're coughing or sneezing or feeling more difficulty breathing during the winter months? Can I see a show of hands? Well, this shows us why this discussion is truly important, and it is the right time to have this discussion. I experienced this too, and every time I come to Delhi, before I even hit the hotel, there is immense number of sneezing that happens. So today what we're going to do in our low emission zone discussion is to look at how can Indian cities act more decisively to reduce transport emissions, and how can we move from pilots to policy and from isolated efforts to systemic change. So let me take you through the session that we're going to have. We're going to first start with Parin Visaria, our program manager and technical expert from ITDP India, who will begin to share some of our research findings and set some context. We will then hear from our chairs, Professor Ashish Verma and Mohinder Singh, who will help us connect the global and national perspectives. And then we'll move into our panel discussion. We have with us a set of eminent panelists. We're very grateful to have Vivek Bimanvarsa, Transport Commissioner, Government of Maharashtra, L. J. Kumar, Member Secretary, Chennai Unified Metropolitan Development Authority, Dr. Shalini Sinha, the Principal Researcher, Central Head, COET, CEPT University, Manjunath Shekhar, Director, Sustainable Mobility, GIZ India, Saurav Dhar, Program Lead, CEEW, and Parin Visaria. And to the audience, we will be coming back to you. We want to definitely engage with you. After every round, we'll take a couple of comments after the first round and a couple of questions after the second. We are here today to use this conversation to sharpen our thinking about low emission zones, not just as technical experiments, but as tools for cleaner air and healthier lives. And today, to make it interesting, we also have Indrajit Sinha, a social sketcher, who will be capturing our discussion live, and you will be seeing that on the screens above as well. So Parin, without any more time, let me pass it on to you. Can you please let us know what Indian cities are doing and learning, and what are the first steps they are taking towards cleaner and healthier streets? Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwati, for setting the context. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so as per a report by International Energy Agency and Niti Aayog, it is a recent report which said that road transport is responsible for almost 20 to 30% of vehicular pollution, of the air pollution, PM 2.5 emissions. And this is very evident from the different emission inventories of different cities that has been compiled. And if you can see this bar graph, which clearly shows the different sources, how much they're polluting, and the one that you see in yellow is the pollution that is coming from vehicle tailpipe. Now, you may definitely see, and this is definitely local emission inventories, but you can see in Delhi, in Bangalore, almost vehicular pollution are going up to 40 and beyond that. In smaller cities, yes, there are other pollutants like road dust, industries majorly contributing, but still we can see, if not the highest contributor, still transport is in the top 3 contributor. So the way we understand, there are 3 mantras to reduce vehicular pollution. and what we call it as improve, shift, and restrict. Improve is improving the vehicular technology, and there are many efforts that right from Government of India to state government to cities are taking actions on that. So the BS6 mandates, the CAFE norms that are in discussion at the central government level, many state governments have adopted electric vehicle policy, and even at the city level, there are initiatives, especially on e-auto rickshaw schemes. When it comes to shift, it is about shifting passenger movement to public transport, walking, cycling, and especially walking, cycling, they're already zero emission modes, and overall, the per capita pollution is quite less when you shift people onto these modes. And finally, it is the restrict, which is discouraging the use of high polluting vehicles. So while the first two are push measures, the third one, which is very critical, equally important to pull that. So all the efforts we are taking in the first two, we can actually see its impact when we implement the third one. So that is where low emission zones come into picture. They're differently known across different global cities. Some call it clean air zones, some call it even healthy air zones, green transport zones. Typically, it's a defined area within the city. It could be part of the city or the entire city corporation, in fact, even metropolitan area, where the entry or the use of high polluting vehicles are discouraged. There are two ways in which they are discouraged. Either they are banned or they are priced. So these two tools are used to discourage them. Cities right from London to even Beijing and Seoul have implemented these initiatives. And these are how they are indicated when you enter a low emission zone. In terms of its enforcement, these non-compliant vehicles are enforced through a network of ANPR camera system, or the way it is in Paris and even in Beijing, that you have a sticker system, which is a visual way of identifying which vehicles are polluting. Also, in terms of the way cities have implemented them, there are different cities who have adopted different strategies. So it is not that everything is done right from day one. It's gradually implemented. So often many cities started with an area of 10 to 20 square kilometer, and eventually they have scaled it up. But the area is sizable enough to see the evidence, to see the change, to build support for further scale up. Also, the restrictions start with high polluting vehicles, and then eventually they move to, there is a roadmap to further look at how we can move towards a zero emission future. And also sometimes the restrictions differ also within different areas of the city. Some area of the city which has higher pollution, there are different, more stringent rules than the rest of the city. While restriction is one part of the story, what cities have also taken the opportunity and which works in our favor to look at sustainable transport as a whole is to also look at mitigation measures, where cities have also implemented scrappage incentives, fiscal incentives to enable the transition towards cleaner vehicles. There are complementary interventions to improve public transport connectivity, walking, cycling infrastructure, to give alternatives which are more cleaner. And finally, very important, cities have also implemented travel demand management measures to manage the traffic congestion. So in case of London, not only do they have low emission zone, but they also have congestion pricing, and so was Beijing. So this is how it all comes together. While that is one, we also conducted a survey of citizens to know what is their perspective and how will the behavior change happen if low emissions were to be implemented. And this is from a data from Pune, Pimpri Chinchwad. The survey conducted about 2,000 surveys, and we asked the users of two-wheelers and cars if there was a pricing, how would they change their behavior. And what we saw is that if there was a pricing, which was 50 rupees per day for two-wheelers and 100 rupees for four-wheelers per day as an environment charge, almost 95% would move to a more compliant vehicle. The other interesting thing is that 60% people said that they would move to a compliant, either an internal combustion engine or an electric vehicle. And finally, people within this also said they'll use public transport up to 20%. This also shows there is a capacity, there is a capability for us to also meet our cleaner electric mobility goals, but also improving walking, cycling mode shares and public transport mode shares. This one interesting thing, the low emission zones actually help to fast track the reduction in vehicular emissions. So while in near future, we will definitely see more and more cleaner vehicles coming into picture. So the red line that you see, in coming times, you will see natural fleet turnover. But what low emissions do is fast track that change. So the change that we see in its business as usual scenario to come in next 15, 20 years, we could achieve that in the next 2-3 years. But yeah, it is easy said than done. The good thing is that right now, as we speak, there are 20 plus Indian cities that are actually exploring low emission zones, different scales, different strategies, right from northern cities to cities in west, to even many cities in south taking up low emission zones with different areas. However, as they explore it, critical things that comes into picture as they implement it is what is the legality behind cities able to restrict or price for non-compliant vehicles? Do we have the air pollution network to establish the baseline data? How about vehicle emissions monitoring? We have the PUC system, but how reliable it is? These are the questions that are getting discussed. What about the data and technology for enforcement? How do we know this vehicle is a BS4 or a BS6 vehicle? Funding and financing, very important. How do we get that? While NCAP is one route, but what are other sources to implement this? Building support, how will this go with citizens? How will this go with political representatives? So what are the ways in which to build support with citizens? And very important, what is the team that's going to work, that is going to be there, that will help towards the implementation of it? And with this, I end my presentation and looking forward to this discussion to discuss some of these aspects today in the discussion to see what is the path ahead for the Indian cities.
Thank you so much, Parin. I think we've heard about how 20 cities across the country are actually exploring this. But the point is, do we have the ecosystem readiness, or what needs to be done so that our ecosystem can become ready? I'd really like to bring in our chair and invite Professor Verma. So India is now facing high PM 2.5 exposure, and transport clearly has to be a part of the solution. I invite you to share your research on highlighting why India needs to act now and not maybe 15 or 20 years later on this front.
Thank you, Ashwati, for having me and sharing this session. It's a pleasure to co-chair this session together with my dear friend Moinderji from Singapore LTA, and of course, Ashwati has been a very dear friend and colleague for a long time, and good to see, many of my good, and close collaborators and colleagues being part of this panel. It's really a wonderful setting. I'm quite pleased and honored to be part of this session. What I really wanted to do was to bring a larger picture to this whole sustainable mobility agenda and the specific focus that we have today on low emission zones. And if I answer your question, why do we act, why do we need to act now and not after 10, 15 years? I think in my understanding and the research we have done so far and the condition and situation that we are seeing in Indian cities, I feel the cities have really reached the tipping point and we are now towards the decline. Our cities, with the current business as usual of handling urban transport, is already seeing a decline in terms of how it is getting unsustainable and unlivable. That's my clear idea, and if we really, unless do drastic relook into how we are handling urban transport and measures that would bring strong changes, we are only scratching the surface, wherein we are just waiting for our cities to go further down. Even they're becoming less and less resilient. And what really pains me to see that Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are fast catching up with the same mistakes and blunders of Tier 1 cities without having any learning curve. I think that's why this conversation becomes very important. What I'm going to do is present, some freshly baked results, something that I have not presented so far in any forum, and I'm using the opportunity of this session to present it. It's the work of my PhD student, Dr. Rohit, who has just completed his work. I think he's here. What the whole point is that can we take the agenda of sustainable mobility just beyond a mobility solution onto connecting to development goals? And here I'm talking about UN SDG goals. We keep talking about UN SDG goals literally in every presentation, but what is that measurable framework we have currently and how we can strengthen it and improve it to even think about connecting interventions like low emission zone or any other sustainable intervention, whether it is push measure or pull measure or combination of push and pull measure in terms of how much it is contributing to different SDGs. So let me, without wasting time, go further. Of course, we all know these 17 SDGs. What we have tried doing is first map which of these SDGs transport is directly or indirectly contributing. And how do we build measurable frameworks to understand how transport is contributing to each of these SDGs, how much currently it has been understood and being reflected in the current indicator frameworks that we have global as well as national, and what improvements need to be done when especially looking at the transport sector. So we first looked at the gaps in the global indicator framework. There are 247 indicators, and our national indicator framework, which has about 306 indicators. When you actually look at closely, GIF has only 7 transport-related indicators out of this 231. And this is the list of those indicators. If you really look at them and find there's a lot more needs to be done to make them comprehensive and good enough to be able to clearly measure and understand in real sense how much and how well transport sector is contributing. And when you look at the national indicator framework, these are just 5 indicators from transport sector that are actually present. It is very thin and inadequate to even understand how much transport is actually contributing. So we have tried developing a framework that is much more comprehensive, that brings a more overarching understanding. And we have developed this transport SDG index at national level, at city level, and at metropolitan level, using which you can compare and rank countries on the achievement of SDGs through transport sector. You can rank and compare cities on SDG achievements, and also the metropolitan level model actually will help you use that index framework to see if any intervention like low emission zone, like metro network expansion, like BRT's network expansion, how much they are contributing to SDGs. I'm not going to present all the 3 indexes here, but essentially we have developed one at national level, another at city level, and third at the metropolitan level, with a lot of inputs and data being used, and develop them into a indicator framework. I'll just, present the national level SDG index that we have, National Sustainable Transport SDG index, and you will see this list of, indicators that we have basically formed. For example, for SDG 3, good health and well-being, these are all the indicators that we have included. PM 2.5 emissions from road transport, from railways, from domestic navigation, from aviation, etc. Likewise, you have SDG 7 on affordable and clean energy, and you can see the indicators that we have got. And similarly for SDG 8, 9, 11, 12, and so on, which have a lot of direct. So these are all indicators that we have used to measure the contribution to each of those individual SDGs. And I'll quickly go into, and then we have also brought them together into one index value. So as an example, if you look at SDG 3, This is the indicators and the definition of each of these indicators and what its contribution would be if there is an increase. So if there is an increase in PM 2.5 levels, of course, its impact and contribution to the SDG would be negative. So this is how we have tried understanding how they would contribute. And we have also categorized them into worst progress towards SDG, that is level E, if the index value goes from 0 to 34, and A, if it is excellent progress, and A plus if there is a complete achievement based on whatever target values for individual SDGs we have got. So if I quickly show you the picture of how we have got data from 2012 to 2018 for India. This is the India result for transport sector. I would see that SDG 3, the scores are ranging from 28 to 26, much below what you would expect. So as per the category, it's the worst achievement towards SDG. In E category, if you look at SDG 7, it's in C category. It has improved a bit, but still, not to the extent that you would like it to be. SDG 8 which is decent work and economic growth, is the only SDG where transport sector contribution is improving and has been substantial and can be categorized at A level. So if we actually see, what we are seeing here is, over the years, most of the SDG contributions have gone to red, except 7 and 8, which means that they're all in the worst category, the worst contribution towards SDG. So it's a very different picture than what you would see overall, what the country is progressing when you start looking at sector-wise and more detailed assessment. And this really tells us that things are not really going the way it should be if you really want to achieve these sustainable development goals. And even the overall index is going down and is in the category of E over the last few years of the data that we had. And as I said, country as such, has been showing the kind of progress like this. But when you look at the sector-wise contribution, the picture looks different. So it's really important that we have much more comprehensive frameworks from each sector and including from transport. I'll only show one slide for the city level index that we have got. And we had data from these 12 cities, basically to calculate the city level index and compare. And you would see so I'm not saying that this is among all the Indian cities, this is only the order within the 12 cities for which the data we had. Mumbai and Pune comes out to be better compared to Delhi, which is really at the bottom. And if you see, as per our classification, Delhi is really in E category in terms of worst progress towards selected UN SDGs and the frameworks that we have got, whereas Mumbai is in A, and some of the other cities, as you can see, are in the B category. So I'll stop here, and hopefully this will give us some food for thought for discussion.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you've highlighted that it's really important for us to measure what matters. In the past, based on the indicator framework that you had mentioned, we were not really measuring the change in pollutants. And you've shown us how SDG 3, for example, where you've looked at the change in pollutants, it's been pretty negative through this entire period. Now, sir, I'd like to come to our co-chair, Mr. Singh. Singapore is often cited as a model for disciplined, clean, efficient transport systems. From your experience, to set the framework for our discussion, could you share how LTA has tackled vehicular pollution, and what are some lessons that our Indian cities can learn to make measurable progress? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aswati. I'm not sure what Singapore can teach you, but I'll certainly share our experience there. First of all, before I go into the details of LEZ or low emission zones, let me talk a bit more broadly on Singapore's mobility strategy in general. Now, we've got, and I think one of the mantras mentioned about the need to sort of restrict high polluting vehicles just now in the first presentation. I think in our case, given our circumstances, we have found it necessary to sort of moderate the increase in vehicle ownership in totality. That means not limited to only highly polluting vehicles, but right across the board. In other words, there is a vehicle control or management policy. Now that's one, okay? And the second one is in terms of congestion management. We have also a policy of congestion charging, just like London, but our policy is really started out as a way to moderate the use of roads, particularly in the central business district. So these are what I would call, for lack of a better word, the push factors. But complementing that, and I don't even call it a complementary, I think it's a paramount strategy, is to improve and encourage people to take public transport as much as possible. In our case now, we have got about 70% of the people using public transport. So the thing is attract people to public transport and discourage people from using their private vehicle. So that's the approach adopted in Singapore in general, to try and give our entire country, I mean, our entire country is not a very big area, it's a red spot, only about less than 800 square kilometers, is to give the entire country a way to sort of limit emissions. Now, coming a bit more specifically to low emission zones, because our entire country, the entire city, the entire country is considered a low emission zone, we don't have formal low emission zones in this part of Singapore and that part of Singapore. The entire city is a low emission zone. And to do that, but we try to achieve the similar outcomes as low emission zones in other countries by countrywide emission standards. Right across the board, throughout the country, you've got emission standards, fuel quality standards, and fiscal incentives to encourage people to go into more cleaner energies and cleaner vehicles, and also enforcement. That collectively reduce vehicle emissions across the entire country rather than within specific zones. So that's the part. And so our approach, if you want me to summarize it, and we can take more questions later, is emission standards are set at registration of vehicles. That means you need to comply with that at the registration of all new vehicles. Secondly, in-use compliance and inspection, which require regular roadworthiness tests of vehicles. For instance, a new car that you buy, a brand new car, has got to go through a roadworthiness and emission standard testing every 2 years. And as he gets older than 5 years, it becomes every year. Okay, so and that's mandatory, and that's tied to the renewal of your road tax. So you need to get that certificate before you can renew your road tax and carry on driving the vehicle. And there are penalties for smoky vehicles and roadside enforcement. There are periodic, regular roadside enforcement on vehicles which are smoky. So these are the three measures. And cleaner fuels, of course, like other countries, we also try to get cleaner fuels into Singapore, natural gas, etc. And then fiscal signals to shape the fleet, vehicle emissions in an early turnover scheme, so that the entire fleet, especially the fleet that causes more pollution, is replaced on a regular basis. That means you don't have any old vehicles running on the roads in Singapore. And electrification and cleaner energy, I think this was covered earlier. There is a sort of a big push to go for electric vehicles and roll out the electric charging infrastructure. I talked about vehicle population control and congestion. Maybe I should talk about another one, which is land use planning, okay? Typically, it's not considered that part of low emission zones. But in our case, and it takes a long time. It's something that has happened over 2-3 years. But in our case, we have tried to do land use planning such that, for instance, I think an example will illustrate it better. For instance, our port facilities. We have relocated our port facilities from the central part of Singapore, south, right to the west, where all our industrial zones are. Which means, one, that the travel distance from the port to your destination in the industrial zone is shorter. So you travel shorter, you cause less pollution. And secondly, travel by these polluting vehicles are away from residential areas. So they take place in that way, okay? Okay, I think I will stop there. Yep, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Just to sort of highlight that, we need to have push and pull measures to actually go, together. And when it comes to something like pollution, we really need to look, maybe like, Singapore's approach of actually looking at it citywide. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on the way in which Singapore is approaching this issue. We'll now open this up to our panel and hear what exactly are the measures that we're doing in our Indian cities, what are things that we can contextualize here, and what are the challenges that we are facing. So first, I'd like to bring you in, Saurav. You've been working quite closely with Commission for Air Quality Management in NCR and adjoining areas. From your experience, what are some key interventions that the agency is taking to tackle tailpipe emissions, and what are some challenges that they're facing? We'd like to have 2 rounds, so about 4 to 5 minutes per question is what we're looking at, so over to you, Saurav.
Thanks, Ashwati, for having me here in this wonderful panel. And at the same time, I'm nervous because my mentor, like Shalini ma'am and Ashish Verma sir, are also sharing the same panel. Yeah, just to brief, the CEW's engagement with CAQM was to reduce the transport-related emissions, not exactly low emission zone, but our intervention should result the reduction of transport-related emissions. Now, in order to do that, the first thing what we did, identify what is the most polluting segment. Is it two-wheeler or is it four-wheeler or something, some trucks or other vehicle segment. So what we found, and also I think in your presentation you mentioned that out of the total emission, the transport sector contributes around 30% of the total emissions. Now, if you just break down and see, out of these 30% of the total emissions, around 68% are being made by the private vehicle. Private vehicle means I am saying two-wheeler and four-wheeler. And this, 68% of the emission share contributes 92% of the vehicle stock in Delhi. The figure which I am referring is basically Delhi. The figure for NCR would be a bit different. Now, what we understand as a next step, what the city should do is they should actually develop a sort of a stock model, because the vehicle characteristics are very different in the cities. For example, the cities in South India, because there is no as such rule you can't ply your vehicle if it is more than 15 years old, which is not the case for Delhi. So the composition of the BS4 and the BS6 vehicle segment are different in the different geography. So for Delhi, what we found that the BS4 vehicle stock, which is 25% of the total fleet size, but it comprises 75% of the transport-related emissions. So definitely BS4 is a stock that should be obsolete over the period of time. BS3 is already out of the Delhi stock business, but BS4 stocks are still plying on the road. And also we deep dive and try to find out out of the different vehicle segment of BS4 stock that are plying on the street in Delhi, what is polluting most? So what we found that the vehicle, the car includes the personal transport and as well as the taxi services, that comprises 40% of the Delhi total transport-related emissions. So definitely on a long-term goal or mid-term goal, car is a segment that needs to be addressed. So now the car has two parts. One is the commercial, one is the personal. Now Delhi government, they already implemented an aggregator policy, which says that in every 6 months, 5% of the operator fleet should be converted to electric. And by 2030, 100% of the fleet should be converted to electric. That means the Ola, Uber that are plying on Delhi street, by 2030, they have to be fully electric. And recently, CAQM also issued a direction that it shouldn't be only Delhi, but the adjoining states like Haryana, UP, they also should have a sort of an aggregator policy. Now, just one thing I just try to highlight here, okay, when we calculate the vehicle stock, there are challenges in computing the UOL number. The reason being is okay, when a vehicle is taken out from the system, there is hardly people who deregistered the vehicle. So the correct way of doing is to conduct some sort of a fuel station survey to identify what is the survival curve, and the vehicle, UOL vehicle, end-of-life vehicle that are plying on the street contributes how many shares. So our analysis mentioned that the vehicle, UOL vehicle that plying on Delhi shouldn't be more than 83,000 to 2.5 lakh. That's the range. We don't know the exact number, but that's the range. So culminating all the points which I mentioned, so what we propose to CAQM are the three things mainly. Number one, we should have a static 4-month grab. Last year we have seen, one day there was grab 3, the next day pollution increases and grab 4, and the third day rain comes, so there was no grab. So instead of having such kind of thing, we should have a static graph for a period of 4 months from November to the month of February, so that we can actually, evaluate how the scenario is changing. And we also suggested CAQM this year, at least there should be 15 days time when we can actually pilot this kind of intervention and evaluate the impact. So that's point number one. Point number two is the aggregator policy, which talks about the electrification of the fleet. So that should be expanded, not only Delhi, but the other adjoining states. And the third thing we are saying, right now we are not in a position maybe to implement a restrictive policy, be it a congestion pricing, be it a parking regulation, strict parking regulations or low emission zone. But the government should at least announce from now onwards, okay, by 2030 or 2028, after 4 or 5 years, I'm going to impose the restrictive measures. So you better to be shift on the electric or try to shift on the public transport. So I just stop here.
Sure. Thank you so much, Saurav. You sort of underscored the fact that we really need to understand our stock. Based on the issues that we face, we'll need to come up with our solutions. But most importantly, we need to set out our vision so that we can all be prepared for where we are headed. With that, let me move on to you, Dr. Shalini Sinha. Shalini, you've studied how air quality and mobility challenges really intersect in dense, historic urban cores. From your perspective, do you think positioning measures which look at reduction of tailpipe emissions around heritage areas could be an effective way to start this dialogue? Is this an approach that you think is scalable or something that is contextual to the cities that you're working with? What are your thoughts and what are the kind of challenges that you're facing?
Thanks, Ashwati. Firstly, very happy to be here, part of this panel on this very important topic of deliberation. Quickly to give a perspective on what work we have been doing in the area of low emission zones. We have been working on low emission zones for Ahmedabad, Junagadh and Lucknow. For Lucknow, the work is still in progress. But when we started looking at the historic cores, the idea behind that was in terms of enhancing the local environment, enhancing the heritage value, protecting heritage assets from pollution damage. And in this process, how do we create a better experience for tourists as well as visitors, as well as residents who are staying in that area? Now, city cores are typically very highly, densely populated. It is a hub of commercial market area, warehousing happening, transport terminal happening. So it's in some ways everything kind of coming together, increasing the challenge. While we were trying to analyze the reasons for the air pollution, now air pollution, it is a local problem, but the reasons are not just local, it is also beyond at the city scale. So what we found was, I think Saurav also was talking about who are the major contributors to the local pollution. So two-wheelers and three-wheelers, we found were the ones which were kind of significantly contributing to the local pollution, NOx levels and the PM levels. We also, when we started out, we also felt that, it is because the city core is also the hub of all the economic activities going on, and therefore the freight vehicles would be significantly contributing. But in comparison to the private vehicles, these shares were much lower. In Junagadh, we've particularly found that the share of pre-BS4 vehicles were very high. And the phasing of these vehicles could make a substantial kind of improvement. So there we were in discussions, or we are in discussions with the local authority in terms of how do you regulate. Now, if you're wanting the pre-BS4 vehicles not to be used, and you know what happens in smaller cities, it's not just Gujarat, but across India, as older vehicles, they slowly, they don't go out of the system, they percolate to these smaller towns. And therefore, if you're wanting to phase them out and you want them to get new vehicles, there's also a socioeconomic concern there. And therefore, how do you do that? How do you engage community? How do you ensure that this is more feasible? On the three-wheeler segment side, what we realized was it makes a lot of economic sense for the three-wheeler drivers to transition, but despite the incentives from the national government, also the state government, people do not have information. So the information asymmetry is also something that needs to be bridged. And again, how do you do that? How do you communicate? And how do you incentivize that transition to happen? Besides that, the charging infrastructure creation. Now, there's a lot of charging infrastructure creation happening even in Ahmedabad for that matter. But none of them are considering three-wheeler charging infrastructure being positioned there. So these were some of the, how do you address the local, basically emissions part of it. Quickly talking about some of the other things that we were looking at, because we're looking at an area level intervention. So enhancing the walkability, traffic management, and the parking management. Now this was important because the idea was the heritage accessibility has to be improved, and if we are able to have more footfall, that will also contribute to the economic side of the city. So, and lastly, the public transport, we cannot discount the fact that privatization and increased numbers can only be tailpipe emissions is one part of it, but the mode shift is another important part of it. So while we're talking about tailpipe emissions, transitioning the mode shift towards public transport is something which is very, very important and needs to be looked at. So I'll stop here for now. Yeah, thank you.
So much, Shalini, and you're really sort of bringing the focus on the fact that we do need to engage the community. This is a huge transition, and for that we definitely need to engage the community. And when we look at infrastructure being ready, even if we're looking at pieces like charging, are we really providing charging for the ones who really need it as well? And of course, definitely we need to put our focus on mode shift simultaneously. This really brings me to the next question to you, Manjunath. You've been working in Surat and many other cities across the country as well. What are your thoughts in terms of your conversations around the vision for tackling tailpipe emissions as we move towards that mode shift to sustainable mobility as well? What are the kind of conversations, what are the kind of challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, thanks Ashwati for having me on this panel. It's quite a privilege to be on this very august presence, I must say, on such an important topic. So just stepping back a bit, I want to add to the statistics on transport contribution to pollution, right? So we heard that it is 20 to 30%. In our work with, along with Bosch, we have observed in many parts of various cities, this number can go as high as 60%. So, again, going back to what Professor Verma presented, that we have very few indicators also to look at from a transport standpoint. I think we're completely missing the point as far as focus on transport is concerned. Our work on low emission zones is in a couple of areas, of course, with Surat and also in Bangalore. I think our primary hurdle is really something to do with governance. I think the lack of governance courage to implement something that brings about restrictions, that controls, let's say, even speed, to look at slow streets, is very, very low. So that's the first hurdle. But once we look at, with obviously constant engagement, these are very high gestation activities as far as we are concerned, unless it's initiated by the city itself. Once you start implementing it, looking at various sub-activities, and ideally these solutions are co-created with citizens, you really see a large change. In our slow street project in Bangalore, we saw the speeds reduced by almost 30%, if I'm not wrong, or it could be more, but it's quite high. That alone is a contributor to lowering pollutions. And these are, of course, in areas where there are schools, right? So also you're addressing safety for school children and various other social benefits. In Surat, of course, we took a long-term view on this, and we're working very closely with the city, looking at very immediate short-term measures, looking at mid-term measures and long-term measures, which are largely to do towards reforms in their TOD policy, etc. But very short-term measures, we're working with the city, still not yet implemented, but we're looking at increasing pedestrian facilities, also cycling, since they have a public bicycle sharing network. So how do you extend that? We are looking at time-based access control for cars and personal vehicles on certain stretches. We are looking at green corridors rather, which should ideally start looking better, and there are more citizens across the city who demand similar infrastructure. It's also a bit of, it's a bit odd that we talk about zones in a city, right? Ideally, you would want the whole city to be low emission. So, these should be treated as pilots. I don't think low emission zones by themselves are projects. They should be treated as pilots, and cities should look at scaling them up so that everybody in the city is able to benefit from it.
Thank you so much, Manjunath. And talking very, very sort of pointed about the fact that we do need governance courage to do these measures, and the fact that our entire cities should be livable. That actually brings a very good point for us to segue to the government team that we have on our panel. So let me first come to you, Jayakumar, sir. Sir, Chennai has been taking a lot of action on improving public transport, walking, expanding parking, etc. Now, from your perspective, can cities take simultaneous action on strengthening sustainable transport foundation, but also targeting pollution reduction? And what are the kind of support that you'd look for from the national or the state governments to support you in reaching the vision that you would have for the city of Chennai? Yes.
Thank you, Ashwati. I wanted to start from the diametrically opposite view, what we are talking about low emission zones. Everybody know that music is good for health, mental health. But if I am hungry, how can I enjoy the music? So in India, many of the cities are hungry in the sense lack of public transport, first and foremost. Because for any city now, for that, LEZ is a top layer. That's what we consider. Because if you see the pyramid, right, that's what Maslow hierarchy of needs. In the pyramid, the basic thing required in any city is public transport. Second one, IPT. Third one, parking management or travel demand measure. Then only the top layer will be LEZ or ultra low emission zones. But we are talking about low emission zones now, but what we think in practical situation, Indian cities, especially Chennai or any other city where the average population is middle class or lower middle class, we are yet to be ready to have a LEZ. So before that, first we have to ensure a proper public transport, proper multimodal integration, proper last mile connectivity at an affordable price, parking management, then we can think about the LEZ. So that's what in Chennai what we are doing now. Our main focus is public transport. So that also will contribute to the low emission because in Chennai we have 3,400 buses today, but as per the standards, we should have 6,500 buses. But we have only 50% of the buses. That means what the average people, middle class people will buy their bikes, run it inside the city. So two-wheeler population is skyrocketing in the city, causing congestion as well as emission. So the one slide I have seen, the ITDP slide in Pembrey-Chinchwad, if you introduce LEZ, 95% of the two-wheeler will go away. I think 95% of the two-wheeler are old. But if you are a middle class, if I am saying your bike is old, you throw the bike, buy the electric bike or new bike. So my livelihoods are there, day-to-day livelihood, how will I discard my bike? So we have to see the economic angle, political angle for the effective implementation because it's a good initiative, the Western concept is good. It is an ideal situation we can aspire for, but we have to lay the foundation robust. That's what we think. Because in Singapore also, our esteemed colleague mentioned that they have a congestion pricing and all. No, Singapore situation is a very compact country, and they have a strong political unitary leadership, we can say. So they have so Singapore, you cannot buy the car as you wish. You have to have an entitlement certificate. Some minimum requirements are there. But in democracies like India, a bigger democracy, we cannot have immediately, you cannot go for restriction. Now, what in our parking policy, we introduced proof of parking as one of the measures to buy a car. That is in a long-term measure because if you have a parking, then only you buy a car. So we can address it in a stage by stage. That's what we are attempting to. I think I am adding the debatable spice here, and other views are welcome.
So we do want to make sure that our dialogue is just not one way. I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience who also sort of may have your thoughts. So sir, recently we had the State of Global Air 2025 report that was released last month by the Health Effects Institute and IHME. It shows some staggering data. Over 2.1 million Indians died in 2023 prematurely from air pollution-related data. So, this is an important point for us to sort of discuss whether it is the time now or in the future, but I completely agree that we need to have foundational measures. Now, coming to you, Vivek Bhimanwar sir, you have been questioned by the High Court. Like Jayakumar sir had mentioned about his approach in Chennai, but in your state, the High Court has demanded a plan from you for phasing out polluting vehicles in Mumbai. So you definitely don't have the time to wait because the judiciary is asking you for action right away. So how can the State Transport Department play stronger roles in leading or enabling this transition so that action to reducing tailpipe emissions can happen along with improving sustainable mobility in a way that not just few cities, but the entire state can actually enable this transformation? What are your thoughts on that front, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Ashwati. Thanks, Ashwati. It's not only our state which need to act fast because the High Court has given some directions. What the statistic you have just said that 2.1 million people died due to air pollution. And I think this gravity will be, the issue will be more severe in the years to come. Just if you look at the statistics, the United States has about 952 vehicles per 1,000 population. China has about 870 vehicles per 1,000 population. And that number in India is 94 per 1,000 of population. So we can just imagine how in the coming years the vehicle population in India will grow. Now, if this is the situation with 94 vehicles per 1,000 of population, if the severity is so high that it becomes the question of a life of a person, it shows how quickly and fastly we have to act on the issue. Yes, of course, in Maharashtra, we had one public interest litigation, and High Court directed the Transport Commissioner to submit the report to the High Court and suggest some measures. And we had our team of experts. And after a long deliberation, we submitted the report. Now, what are the immediate steps that? As we know that the vehicle inventory is, that the vehicle population is going to increase from year to year, no doubt we have the BS6 vehicles from 2020-21. But the total percentage of BS6 vehicle in a total in a vehicle population is still not beyond 20%, 18%. And we do not have time to wait for another 10 to 15 years to replace this old inventory by the BS6 vehicle. The immediate challenge is how to replace this BS4 and below vehicle within the next few years. One, the emission factor of the BS6 vehicle and say BS3 or BS2 vehicle, that emits 84 times more than the BS6 vehicle. A transport category of a BS2 vehicle, the emissions is almost 84 times. I am talking typical about a heavy vehicle, a diesel heavy vehicle, a BS2 type, as compared to the BS6 LMV. So merely when we talk about the EV, that number doesn't signify the impact. Now if you have to be impactful, for the LEZ, the first thing we need to, either you have to replace this BS4 and below inventory with a new vehicle, or it's high time for the government to come out with some scheme so that this vehicle can be retrofitted. The easiest option, I think, the retrofitment of a diesel to CNG is now very affordable, and CNG is almost a cleaner fuel, not like EV, but it almost a cleaner fuel, even better than the BS6. So my suggestion at this point is that for this old inventory, the government must come out with a scheme where this diesel vehicle can be retrofitted to the CNG vehicle, because today the average life of a transport vehicle in India is at least 14 to 17 years. So these vehicles are not going to be replaced for another 10 to 12 years unless we come out with some scheme. That's number one. And of course, as the earlier speaker has said, we should have the policy for the congestion pricing as a parking policy. Merely providing the more parking is not sufficient. We have to regulate the purchasing of a vehicle. But on one hand, we talk about the pollution and the congestion, and on the other hand, there are efforts to promote the automobile industry and induce the people to buy the more and more vehicle. So we are working in a world where the two departments have actually the goals which are contrary to each other. But of course, I think these are some measures which this is what we have suggested to the High Court in our committee also. I think that's
sure. Thank you so much, sir. I mean, just highlighting that.
I think this is the point, on the alternate fuel. This is also one practical way of going ahead.
Sure, sir.
If you go for a CNG or CBG, compressed biogas, not only for completely electric vehicles, because electric vehicle, again, you have to see well-to-wheel pollution. Because if you are generating your electricity through burning coal 75%, and then you are saying I'm doing electric vehicle here, but overall you are doing more pollution. So now Government of India also is planning to do away with a net zero in 2070. Earlier it was 2050, now it has been shifted to 2070. So it's a long-drawn strategy. So that's what we have to go in a practical terms.
So, I mean, clearly just understanding that swift action needs to be taken, and we will have to look at what are the solutions that we can take, which is there. So let me just bring you in, Parin, now. And what we'd really like to see is that we've seen examples of working with Pimpri Chinchwad. They've brought LEZ in the graded response plan. But as the city is moving towards implementation, what are some of the actions that the city is prioritizing? And just before I go into you, I'd also like to let the audience know that after Parin's point, we'll be taking a couple of comments. So please keep your comments handy. And short, so that we can take your comments and then come back to one set of comments from the panelists as well. Parin, over to you.
Thanks, Ashwati. So right now, Pimpri Chinchwad is focusing on two things. One is on figuring out the legality of implementing low emission zones, and secondly is the community engagement. Let me give a context. So in Pimpri Chinchwad, they have included low emission zones as a strategy for under graded response action plan. It is not that they're banning vehicles, but they're pricing. That's the route that they have taken. Because for them, the city decided if they were to ban, it will be a very radical position for the city to take. So they have taken pricing. Pricing primarily focused on two-wheelers, personal cars, and freight vehicles, because 90% of the PM 2.5 emissions, NOx, is coming from these vehicle categories, and that's where the target is. The charges are about 100 rupees per day, and for bigger vehicles, 500, freight vehicles, 500, that's the rate. Now, while this is what the city has decided, it's a citywide policy decision, so it is not focusing on any part of the city, but a citywide decision. Now, how does one implement this? Like, legally, is city allowed to charge for pricing? That's the question that first came in. So while they included in the grab, but now when it comes to the implementation, is that possible? And when I say implementation, we're not speaking about implementation right away. City is planning to implement, let's say, in 27 or 28. But as we looked at the legality, we realized one thing. Because we had the question to city that if you're able to charge for parking, why can't you charge for low emission zone? And then as we did more investigation into the Municipal Act of Maharashtra, we realized that Municipal Act of Maharashtra clearly says that cities can charge for parking, but not for environment. So this is where one option was that if the city really wants to do it, we need to bring amendment to the Municipal Corporations Act of Maharashtra. The other route that we figured out that Maharashtra Pollution Control Board has greater authority. They have powers under Air Act to tell cities on what can be done, along with Transport Department. That's possible. But again, where does this revenue go? So these are all the details that we are right now figuring out. But in short, in a nutshell, what we have realized that city, it's not just about city, but the involvement of state government is equally important, and not just from one department, but MPCB, transport, environment, all they need to come together. And the final thing on the community engagement, we've just started with it, though we are not building any support as of now, but more to understand the reaction of the citizens of if this was to come, how will they react? A simple thing, air pollution is invisible. So first we wanted to establish even citizens think that air pollution is a problem. Because scientific data is one thing, but what citizens believe is another. So that will give us an idea. If 80% people feel that air pollution is not a problem, then we need to make such strong communications campaign to help the cities with that. So we've been doing focus group discussions, interacting with businesses to know how will that transition look like. and what will it be, trying to gauge that what will be the challenges to enable this implementation.
Thank you so much, Parin. Really highlighting that we need to look at amendments and acts, look at how we can bring the departments together when we want to actually successfully implement something like this, and what is the narrative, depending on what our environment and what our citizens are actually thinking about this. So at this point, I'd really like to just, we have a lot of experts in the audience, and we want to make sure that this is a conversation two-way. Can I have if anyone wants to share their comments, we have someone at the back. Can someone with a mic, please? And if there's anybody else who would like to say a comment, please put your hand up as well. So, yeah, could you please introduce yourself and share your comment? And be brief.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sandeep Das from Arcadis. My question is to the panel that what are your views regarding how positive a step is it introduction of E20 and E30 fuel towards achieving LEZ targets and through cleaner fuel technology? What learnings can we take from this initiative in terms of public acceptance as well?
Sure. So we'll come back to questions. Anyone with any comments? Yes, Vivek over here. There are two comments here. Can we have the mic here? Yeah.
Hi, this is Vivek from Artha. Thank you for the panelists for this wonderful presentation today. We have been working on low emission zones, and we call them clean air zones for a reason. We have been working with Andhra Pradesh, the government of Andhra Pradesh, for about 3 years now. It's been very interesting. So in terms of strategy, or even in terms of positioning, we had a lot of internal debate, should we call it low emission zones, clean air zones. And when we were talking with the authorities with the Pollution Control Board in Andhra Pradesh, in Visakhapatnam, Vijayawada, the consensus was that if you talk about low emission zones, unfortunately, has a bit of a negative connotation. If you talk about it as clean air zones, and if you position it in a way where you're talking about the health of certain vulnerable communities in and around hospitals, in and around schools, places of worship, you'll get a lot of traction for that. And unfortunately, in our country, we need quick wins, low-hanging fruits, so on and so forth. So we decided to term it as clean air zones. And our approach has been very clear that we'll, of course, we'd like to scale it up throughout the cities, but we'd start with areas in and around hospitals where you have people with, whose immunity is compromised, schools and all. And again, what we looked at is two things, because people talked about budgets, people talked about, where is the money going to come from. So two things which is very important learnings for us is try and, rather than create a new initiative, look to see how these initiatives can be subsumed within existing initiatives. So Visakhapatnam, the commissioner was supposed to be here today, unfortunately he couldn't make it. They have something called as an Eco-Vizag project. So we were told, why don't you work with the Eco-Vizag project? Similarly with Vijayawada, they have other projects. They have an agency called as Swachhandra Corporation. So make sure that your initiatives are subsumed within that. They'll find the money. Also look at initiatives which don't cost too much money. So if we look at parking, if we look at banning certain types, don't look at bans, but look at during peak hours, can we restrict the movements? Back it up with scientific evidence. So we have done that. Shockingly, there are a lot of BS3 vehicles in both these cities, and that's not uncommon. So that was a learning for us. In response to Parin's point, which he mentioned about laws and so on and so forth, what we've realized is, yes, there are laws, but if a city wants to figure out a way in order to bring about change, they can do it. There are laws, there are enough ways in which it can be done. The key is to work within the government, work within. Obviously, you have the top tier of management commissioners who come and go, but it's very important to embed it within the cadre, which is going to be their technical and managerial cadre, which is going to be there. And again, kudos to these cities. Like Visakhapatnam has something called as an SRU, Sustainable Resilience Unit, which has urban experts, and we have been working with them. Again, mixed results sometimes, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. But I do believe that this is, so it's not the answer. Clean air zones are not the only answer, but it's something in your arsenal which you can use and then move forward. Yeah, that's my limited point.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vivek. So we'll come back to the audience after the next round. We'll definitely come back. Okay, all right, sir, we'll take yours.
I'm Dhirendra Mehrotra. I'm working for a PSU. It was a wonderful session what we had today. The only thing what we were unable to talk was per capita emission. We talked about emissions, but not the per capita emissions. We have this low emission zones, but we talked about congestion as well. So my suggestion is that now we have to give emphasis on discouraging of single person using the vehicles. Or in other sense, if we are losing the seating capacity of the vehicle, because I was traveling from Delhi to Gurugram yesterday. In morning and evening also, I saw vehicles with seating capacity of 5, 6, 7, and single person using that. So we'll have to find the ways and means with the legislative support to have the graded charging or discounts. In case we are driving our vehicle with loss of seating capacity, we'll have to have a graded charge, or then we can have a discount. So this is my suggestion.
Thank you so much, sir. And like Vivek just said, where there's a will, there's always a way. So we'll potentially find ways to do these innovative things as well. So now coming back to the panel, and this is going to be a quick fire where we're basically looking at what is the next one big move for low emission zones. We really want your forward-looking thoughts. You know, what gives you hope? What was the next big move that we can do on this front? Vivek, so let me start with you. What is that one lever the state government can pull to help cities move faster? What do you think, sir? Yes, over to you, sir.
The immediate move the government should do is to have the parking policy and the low emission zone. And of course, to replace the BS4 and below vehicle from the metro cities. That should be the top priority.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. This is a bit, I'm sure, Jaikumar, sir, you have lots to resonate with the parking policy as well. So what do you think, sir, when it comes to Chennai? Is there a way, so clearly clean mobility, that is sustainable mobility efforts is definitely a priority. So what are your things, what are your thoughts in what you should prioritize there? Is there anything with the emission reduction that can go hand in hand? So one measure that you would like to say?
So we are heavily focusing on improving the public transport, first point. We already started inducting additional buses. And every year now we are suggesting to the government that we will add 1,000 buses. Already 600 electric buses have already come in, and slowly it will be coming. So next 5 years, Chennai will have every year minimum 800 to 1,000 buses net addition. That's what it has been agreed by the government. Second one, we will be adding around 120 kilometers of metro network in 2 to 3 years. Then last mile connectivity, not in isolation, as a part of metro to the doorsteps. That is a policy we are making. And metro company will run the last mile services around 5 kilometer radius at a flat rate of 20 rupee or 30 rupee. So that our last mile connectivity will improve. People will avoid the two-wheeler or four-wheeler, get into the metro, and it will in turn improve the metro ridership.
Sure.
This is what the steps we are taking, and the parking policy we already launched. That also will be implementing, and parking management under single management, that is parking pricing, planning pricing, as well as enforcement. Police also will be there in the parking management unit. As a single unit, we will be controlling the entire system, managing the system. So that has also been accepted by the government. And as an immediate LEZ measure, in Chennai is a port-based city like Mumbai. We have 3 ports, around 20,000, more than 20,000 trucks are there, of which more than 6,000, 7,000 trucks are very old trucks. Maybe that is what, BS3 or below. So these trucks has to be replaced by apt means. Government, we are suggesting in our city logistics plan, as a part of the city logistics plan, how to phase out these trucks. So similarly, some more measures we are planning also, old vehicles, conversion, CNG conversion is a good measure in Mumbai. we also check with Mumbai what is their initiative. We can try to implement initially.
Sure, sir. So going full blaze on sustainable mobility and then focusing on the freight transition as well. Shalini, based on your work, what is that one design or planning idea that you think can really help make LEZs visible, accepted, and successful?
I think people orientation is something which is very, very essential. So when we are talking about solutions, it is something that has to be co-created. We have to work with diverse set of stakeholders. And working at that level, I think, is something very important. There's another point I will add here. When we're talking about low emission zones, clean air zones, again talking about people-centric thing, we need to think about public transport as an integrated system and an attractive one, and not really focusing on the modes. So those are
definitely.
2 points.
So making sure that whatever we do are people-oriented and public transport that is integrated, attractive, affordable. Manjunath, what is your practical opportunity to really implement these measures? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think one low-hanging fruit which is possibly available with every state and city is to reduce the conditions for Grab, in the sense that, we don't have to wait for severe, very poor, right? The moment it goes above normal, introduce Grab. I think that is something that's realistic. The second would be to look at low emission zones more as urban transformation zones to treat pollution as a real health risk and take this on mission mode. And finally, I think it requires multiple repetitions to focus on public transport to increase that. Electrification is okay, it is the need of the hour, but yeah, if we don't address the modal shift, we are not changing much as far as road safety and also vehicular population on the road is concerned. So these 3 points.
Thank you so much, Manjunath. Really looking at coming at a mission mode for these low emission zones and looking at it as an urban transformation measure. Coming to you, Saurav, from your vantage point, what is that one institutional structural change that you think needs to be done in order to really get going with low emission zones? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so our thought is for any project or any initiative, it requires funding support from the government. Now, the point is where the fund will come. So recently, we did a study in UP where actually we surveyed or interviewed around 400 officials in UP, 17 municipal corporations in UP. And not only the municipal corporation body, but the officials who are associated with municipality, urban development authority, traffic police, the CTUs, etc. So our understanding was the city level officials are much occupied full day to drive an initiative like low emission zones. So it has to be driven from a state government agency similar to what we have like DULT in Karnataka. And the second thing what we want to mention is the trenches that comes to the state urban transport fund or the urban transport fund, what we call UTF, that should be strengthened and the mechanism should be in place that the fund is good enough to drive an initiative like the low emission zone. For example, I'm just ending with an example. In Karnataka, I think they are collecting 1% sales on vehicle tax. They are collecting 2% sales on property tax. And also there are budgetary allocation from the government side in the SUTF bucket. Whereas in UP, it's only the 0.5% tax on the property. So because the trenches are less in other states in compared to some of the progressive states like Karnataka, it also impact on the on-ground interventions as well.
Funding is very, very critical. Thanks, Saurav, for actually highlighting that. Parin, what is that one action that you think that the state or the city or the national government should focus on?
I think I'd like to extend what Saurav just said. Initiative like this requires a strong team. And while we have team at the city, but you need a strong team at the state level also. integrated team, not because this cross cuts across transport, environment, even to some even to urban development departments. So at least we could start our dialogue and make sure that as cities implement, they are also there, so we can move things in the city and also scale up.
Thank you. So we definitely need a strong team to make sure that all of this can actually come together. So now, as we've come to the end of this particular session, we have about 3 minutes to wrap up. So we did want to take some questions from the audience. We had one question that already came up, which was looking at cleaner fuel technologies and what our thoughts on that are. Is there anyone in the panel who'd like to take a stab at that question?
Cleaner fuel, as far as I know, I just didn't explain also now, ethanol blending in petrol, already 20% has been completed by April 1st of this year. And diesel also, alternative have been thought of. Ethanol have a problem, so alternate also has been planned. CNG, CBG is a good scope. Compressed biogas, because many of the local bodies in cities, they have a lot of solid waste. So this solid waste can be converted into biogas. So compressed biogas, many of the cities in Chennai, we have 2 plants. So this CBG can be used in the buses, urban buses. So it will be having a very good ecosystem. Then we'll generate manure also. So your solid waste also will be managed better. This is also one of the fuel. Then clean fuel, Government of India is going for BS5, BS6, now it is going. Then ultimately electric vehicles. So that's what the evolution, and we can have a mixture in the initial stages. Slowly we can evolve into the top level. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Is there any other question that the audience has before we move on to our chairs to sort of summarize the discussion? Yes, there's a question here. That would be the last question for our session.
Hello, my name is Aditya Swarnakar. I am from CW. My question is to Vivek sir and Kumar sir. Sir, as you have mentioned, like Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra are among the top 5 states in the country with the longest coastal lines. And when we are talking about the cleaner transportation technology, so how does Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra see themselves in uses of hydrogen? Because a lot of fundings have been already there if we are trying to work on that. And it will be adding up to the energy independency also. And for Maharashtra, the BEST has the upper hand there, as it is working as a DISCOM and as a transport corporation. So, sir, your take on that. Thank you.
You are asking about hydrogen gas.
The question was about hydrogen.
Hydrogen.
And what is our opinion on hydrogen?
See, this hydrogen technology, I think it is not yet commercially fully exploited. It's still at some experimental level. As a government, we will respond to the market demand. As the technology evolves, as the technology matures, we will respond to that technology and will be the facilitator. As of now, I don't see any country is using the hydrogen fuel at a large scale. So it's still evolving and still maturing. As it matures, we respond to that.
In Tamil Nadu, in Tuticorin port, there is a hydrogen handling facility is being developed, but it is mostly a transshipment facility. So, as Mr. Vivek told, the handling is very, so this is an initial stage. I think Honorable MORTH Minister also has launched a hydrogen vehicle also some few months back. So, it is an evolving stage, and that also you have a green hydrogen, not a grey hydrogen. So, again, we have to focus on the green hydrogen. So we are also welcoming anybody is having ideas. We can separately also we can catch up. You can mail us also. We will discuss with our transport department and other departments also. We can coordinate as far as hydrogen is concerned. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. So now I'd really like to bring our co-chair and chair to just sort of bring together all of these threads. What are some critical steps that we should be focusing on? So we'll start with our co-chair and then go to
Okay, listening to the conversation, I've got 3 wish lists, okay? 3 items to wish for. The first item is to have a robust conversation among the city officials, leaders, and government officials on the roles of the different forms of transport in our cities, okay? And arising from that, working out an integrated mobility policy that favors public transport, and that favors public transport over private transport, and that favors public transport which is not limited only to metros, which includes buses, which includes active mobility modes such as cycling, walking. I mean, we talk a lot about walkability in the other sessions. So that's the first wish list I have. The second one is that there is also a very clear, rigorous registration, testing, and emission inspection or emission standards in our cities. That means it's robust, it's enforceable, and moving forward, and then that's the second one. And the third one is when we are looking at early low emission zones, we should perhaps see whether we can take the opportunity to actually redevelop or redesign parts of the area creatively so that it becomes more livable. So in other words, when you are seeing how to make the zone low emission, at the same time, think about how to make it more livable. These are my 3 big wishes.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, to our chair, what are your 3 big wish lists?
I think we really had a wonderful panel and excellent, set of points that came out. Before I give a couple of minutes of my concluding remarks, let's first clap for Ashwati, for wonderfully moderating this session, as always, and, bringing the whole synthesis very nicely. I think we, as far as this whole notion and definition of LEZ, I would, like to recall what Mohinder ji said and Manjunath was amplifying, that we can't just simply take one area or one zone only as low emission zone. I mean, what is low emission zone? Essentially, to have the pollution levels below the CPCB prescribed levels. Now, it cannot be just for one zone. But yes, you need pilots to demonstrate what interventions and ideas can actually bring the pollution levels below the CPCB standards. But at the end, it's the whole city that has to be under those pollution levels. So it cannot be just one zone or one area. We have to take the whole city, whole area as low emission zone and see that the pollutants levels are within the CPCB limits. I think that's important. And I would still like to emphasize this point and this whole idea of push and pull measures. These measures of reducing pollution, improving air quality, etc., cannot work in isolation until we also hit at the core issues and core problems of mobility, which is traffic congestion, which is travel time delays, which is unreliable transport system, etc., etc. There has to be a win-win situation. And from that point of view, while you have pull measures of improving public transport, etc., increasing their network coverage, improve first mile, last mile, etc., as Jay Kumar ji was pointing out, if you don't have push measures in place along with the pull measures, your impact and benefits would still be half-baked and suboptimal. And so on this point, I would differ a bit from you, Jay Kumar ji, that we cannot wait for the public transport network and everything to come in place and then think about push measures. And I'll give the example of Delhi. Delhi already has 350 plus kilometer network of metro, but I often in many ways call Delhi's case as a lost opportunity for the simple reason that you still, in spite of such extensive metro network, you still have mode share of metro which is much less than what we would have expected, and its impact on improving the traffic congestion issues in Delhi. Plus, the pollution levels have not gone down, and Delhi, as you saw from my slide, comparing the 12 cities, Delhi still figures in the worst, achievement towards SDGs, including the pollution level. So, yes, it's correct that politically they are sensitive and the understanding is very less. But as I was saying yesterday in the conclave session, which Secretary Saab was, chairing, when he asked me what are the missing data points, I think we need to build a more clear data points as to how push measures together with these pull measures would help country achieve all the targets that they have committed to, whether it is INDC, whether it is net zero target or any other target that government has binded itself to. If we can clearly show with data points that push measures together with pull measures is where you would be able to achieve those targets that government wants to achieve, I'm sure then there'll be better buy-in. Otherwise, I think we'll really see suboptimal results of even investing in public transport infrastructure. So with that conclusion and with the hope that we'll really see more clear implementation and more evidence from our cities on low emission zones, hopefully share them in the next UMIs, I'm sure we'll have a better future. With these words, I again thank the whole panel and our moderator for wonderfully having this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Co-Chair Mohinder sir and Chairman Ashish Verma sir for concluding the session. Thank you, ma'am, moderator, for conducting the session so smoothly and keeping the session lively and interactive. Now I would like to request the Honorable Chair of the session to kindly present the memento to our esteemed panelists in the order of their appearance, followed by the moderator. So first name is Sri Pareen Bisaria. Pareen Bisaria. Next is Saurabh Dhar. Next, Shalini Sinha ma'am. Next, Manjunath Sekhar sir. Sri Jay Kumar sir. So Vivek Biman Bar sir. Next, ma'am, Swati Dilip. Now I request Sri Subhas Kumar, Director in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, to kindly come on a stage and give a memento to co-chair and chair. Sri Mohinder Singh sir. Now to the, sir, to chairman also. Please give a big round of applause. Thank you, ma'am. As we conclude, on behalf of the Ministry and Housing and Urban Affairs, I wish to express heartfelt gratitude to all the dignitaries and speakers and participants for their valuable contribution and sharing the insights in making this session a success. Your presentation and discussions have been incredibly informative and engaging, offering us new perspective and ideas. Thank you all. Please join the lunch also.